They called it the Vault of Rarities, though nothing about the place was rare to the creatures who ran it, just valuable. The audience chamber pulsed with ultraviolet lights that stung human eyes, and the scent of metallic oils and decaying flora drifted through the air. Among the shifting masses of insectoid limbs, scale faces, and silicon-armored figures, one stood motionless at the center of a crystalline platform. Shackled but upright, a man, terribly out of place, waited to be sold. They listed him simply as Lot 72, Terran marksman, last of species. The announcement rolled in 32 dialects, each laced with thrill of spectacle. There were no more humans in the Empire, or so they believed. Earth had gone silent nearly a decade prior, swallowed by an unknown collapse or war. Few in the Empire bothered to investigate. The planet had been sealed off, declared sterile. That made this specimen invaluable. A living human was a miracle. A trained killer from a species known for unpredictability and savagery? That was a luxury. Talon Redzar, a Zerati noble with polished bone armor and gold-threaded antennae, leaned forward from his hovered dais. "Is he functional?" he asked through a vocalizer, his words thick with disdain. "Fully combat-capable," the auctioneer replied with a click of his mandibles. "Sedated and behaviorally inhibited via cortical loop, non-lethal. No risk." The human's name was Elias Vance. He hadn't spoken since capture, not during the transit through cryosuspension, nor while being exhibited like a pet. He didn't need to. Observation was his first weapon. Though his limbs ached and his mind throbbed under the influence of the neural dampener, his eyes remained sharp. He scanned the crowd, memorizing the rhythm of the guards' patrols, the lag between stasis field fluctuations, the location of the armed drones perched along the upper gallery. It wasn't fear that gripped him, but calculation. Bidding began, each offer flashing across the air in synchronized colors. The first came from a venerary priestess, curious about autopsying a human brain. Another from a warlord of the Rithik, who saw Elias as a potential trophy assassin. Each offer spiraled higher. The Empire loved their exhibitions of dominance. Buying a Terran was a status symbol, a demonstration of their superiority. The auctioneer's voice crackled again. This one was recovered from a derelict vessel outside the Juno perimeter, a Terran stealth craft, nearly invisible to our sensors. He was the only occupant. The rest were less intact. Vance flinched almost imperceptibly. That ship had been their last option, a long-range insertion vessel with experimental cloaking. Their mission had been reconnaissance, not war. Something had gone wrong, and now he stood alone beneath a theater of monsters. A bid came that silenced the room. 3 million kavars. Immediate claim. No inspection, said a voice like cool glass grinding over stone. Gasps rippled through the audience. Eyes turned toward a floating orb that shimmered in opaque waves. No one knew the species behind the orb's mask, only that it belonged to the Collectors, an old and secretive guild that trafficked in biological anomalies. They rarely appeared, and when they did, they bought with finality. The auctioneer paused, looked uncertain, then bowed deeply. Sold. Vance didn't resist as the stasis field deepened. He didn't need to. They would take him to a facility, isolate him, study him. And somewhere in that transition, there would be a window. There always was. The Collector's drones floated forward, magnetically attaching to his restraints. They lifted him like a prize. Through the field's shimmer, he could still see the audience, their faces contorted in disgust, fascination, triumph. He memorized them. In the hours or days that followed, Vance drifted between lucidity and chemical sleep. He was probed, scanned, and moved. At last, when he awoke fully, he found himself standing in a sterile chamber with no walls, just light. A single chair stood before him. It was shaped for something much taller, with limbs not quite human. "Elias Vance," said the voice again. No source, just ambient tone. Sniper. Recon designation Icarus, 9. Trained under sole command protocols. "You've been studying me," Vance said, his voice dry. "We study everything we purchase." He looked around, tested his restraints. None. Strange. "You want information?" "No. We wanted a relic. You're the last of your species, are you not?" He remained silent. Interesting. Silence is one of your kind's most primitive and most effective weapons. It obscures intent, delays reaction. It is why you excelled at killing. Vance moved toward the chair, sat down slowly. If I'm the last, then what's the value? I'm obsolete. Uniqueness has worth. Your biology, your mind. You were a predator born in a society that rewarded restraint. That paradox fascinates us. You want to understand humanity by studying me. No, the voice said colder now. We want to own it. Something in that word snapped the last of Vance's composure. Not rage, clarity. The Empire didn't fear humanity's extinction. They didn't even acknowledge it. To them, humans were myths, footnotes, or commodities. But the truth was simpler. The Empire hadn't checked, hadn't asked why Earth went silent, because they'd assumed no one would dare remain. A faint vibration trembled beneath his feet. The lights dimmed. Something's happening, he said. The voice was quiet for a moment. Then, we are detecting unauthorized signals. External breach, unknown origin. Vance stood. His body remembered things his mind had suppressed. Muscle memory wasn't erased by sedation. The tremor grew. You thought I was the last, he said. The light fractured. From the upper arc of the chamber, a thin seam split open with a hiss. Somewhere beyond it, engines roared in a frequency not used in centuries. You didn't ask the right questions. The room went dark, and Elias Vance smiled. Elias Vance woke to the sensation of motion. Not the gentle drift of artificial gravity, but the shuddering pulse of acceleration through slip space. The interior of the chamber was gone, replaced by a narrow metal cell that hummed with quiet menace. No restraints this time. No visible guards. Only a narrow vertical slit at eye level glowed dimly, casting shadows that danced with each tremor of the vessel. Wherever they were taking him, it wasn't part of the Empire's official territories. He pressed a hand to his temple. The neural inhibitor was still there, but weaker. The dosage was being reduced, perhaps intentionally, perhaps due to distance from the original suppression field. Either way, he felt it. The cold slide of awareness sharpening like a blade in oil. The door unsealed with a hiss. A figure stepped inside, taller than any humanoid species Vance recognized. Its skin was iridescent obsidian, segmented like an insect's carapace, yet fluid in motion. No face, just a mask of polished alloy etched with arcane circuitry. It paused as if inspecting him. You are property now, the creature said. Its voice echoed not through sound but directly into Vance's auditory nerves. You will serve until expiration. Vance remained seated, legs folded beneath him. Who are you? The being tilted its head, unreadable. We are the Oceantier. We restore value to the obsolete. You mean you sell weapons? We preserve what others destroy. Your skills will serve the labyrinth. The labyrinth. Vance had heard whispers during his brief re-entry into the wider galaxy. A deep-core war zone, far from galactic regulation, where captured species were deployed in tactical games of war for profit and entertainment. A blood sport, and he was now part of it. Training began without warning. He was given no weapons, no context, just thrown into artificial environments with shifting gravity, synthetic predators, and hostile drones. Observers watched from hidden alcoves, cataloging his movements, his reactions. At first, Vance played the part. Disoriented, slow, reactive. Let them believe he was still degraded. But with each day, his neural inhibitor eroded and his edge returned. He began to manipulate the simulations, lure drones into each other's line of fire, trigger feedback loops in the environment to crash terrain rendering, exposing seams in the illusion. The Oceantier noted the changes. They were pleased. Eventually, they gave him a weapon, a modular plasma rifle, old, scarred, unreliable. A test. He took it apart in minutes, reassembled it with spare parts from discarded drones, and tripled its output efficiency. When the next simulation began, his kill count triggered a system halt within 3 minutes. They upgraded his cell after that. No more transport cage. Now he had a chamber with minimal comforts, an illusion of status. He wasn't alone in the labyrinth. Other species lived as tools here, were constructs, pit slaves, test fodder. They avoided him, not out of fear but reverence. In silence, he moved like a shadow between assignments, never speaking, always watching. And he learned. The Ocean Tier weren't part of the Empire in name, but they served it. They auctioned victories to the highest bidder. Their simulations fueled real conflicts. Every battle they hosted was a reflection of wars being fought elsewhere, proxy conflicts where lives like his were used to predict outcomes. Vance played the long game. Each assignment gave him data. Each kill gave him clarity. And each failure, staged carefully, gave his captors confidence that they still controlled him. They didn't know about the chip, buried deep beneath the flesh of his shoulder. The chip had been inert since capture, a black box beacon developed by Sole Command. It only activated once the carrier remained alive beyond 2 years behind enemy lines. A dead man's trigger. It had activated the moment the inhibitor weakened below a certain threshold. Somewhere, humanity had heard him. In a darkened hangar below the labyrinth's combat sphere, Vance waited. His assignment had just concluded. A solo elimination of a genetically modified Helarid pack across a mountainous terrain riddled with gravity wells. It had taken him 11 minutes. He should be resting. Instead, he worked. He'd begun assembling a transmitter weeks ago from stolen drone parts. The guard rotations were predictable, and his movements went largely unmonitored now. They believed he had accepted his role, that he thrived in the hunt. They weren't wrong, but his hunt was never for sport. It was for the breach. The signal was almost ready. One more node, one final calibration. Footsteps approached, metal claws on grating. He didn't move. The Ocean Tier Overseer entered with 2 drones flanking it. It carried a data crystal. "You are requested," it said. "Your performance has drawn attention." "I perform," Vance replied flatly. "You will be demonstrated for potential buyers. They wish to see the last human in action." He turned, meeting the blank gaze of the mask. "Let them come." That night, beneath the hush of recycled air and flickering power conduits, Vance transmitted the signal. Short burst, encoded, untraceable unless you knew the frequency. He watched the reply light flicker green. Confirmation. Somewhere in the darkness, humanity had listened. They were out there, waiting or preparing. He lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling, heart steady, mind quiet. The next day, the demonstration would begin, and the trap would be sprung. The staging ground was a canyon world designated Theta 4, chosen for its hostile terrain and atmospheric volatility. It resembled Earth's badlands, jagged cliffs, bone-dry ravines, and crimson skies split by perpetual lightning. Elias Vance stood atop a ridge, his silhouette backlit by flashes of static fire. Around him, the ground vibrated with the approaching echo of atmospheric dropships. This was a demonstration, a live hunt, a recreation of a Terran battlefield, populated with synthetic enemies and observation drones. The audience was remote, nobles, military strategists, arms dealers, all tuned into the broadcast to watch the last human kill. He scanned the horizon, feeling the weight of the rifle in his hands. Modified again, he'd hardwired a guidance override into the targeting system, repurposing it as a data relay. The activation of the chip had not gone unnoticed. Somewhere above, satellites had already locked on. The game began with a screech. A pod burst open to the east, releasing 3 Sarek-class mechs, their movements brutish and efficient, simulated enemies, but built for real lethality. They were meant to chase, to corner, to overwhelm. Vance dropped low and moved without hesitation, fading into the jagged terrain like mist. The performance had to look authentic. He picked the first mech apart from 400 meters, one round through a poorly shielded servo joint, followed by a second into its coolant tank. It buckled, sparked, and collapsed. He let the other 2 see the fall. Fear was a language he understood intimately, but as the second target rose into view, it wasn't fear that overtook it. It paused, turning its head toward the sky. Vance followed its gaze. The clouds above were parting, not gradually but violently, as if punched through from orbit. A sharp line of pure white tore through the crimson, and with it came a sound that made even the combat drones hesitate. Not thunder, not propulsion. Something else. Something heavier. From the breach descended a ship. No known signature. No transponder. Matte black hull, angular and wrong, as though reality bent around it. It did not glide. It dropped like a blade. The Empire watchers didn't know what it was. The Oceantier didn't either. But Vance did. He whispered it to no one. Scalpel class. Ghost variant. Soul Command had come. The ship struck atmosphere and released a pulse, a sphere of electromagnetic silence that wiped the broadcast, scrambled sensors, and crashed every surveillance drone on the field. The audience went blind. The demonstration was over. The two remaining Mets turned to engage the descending vessel, but their targeting systems flickered and died. They fired blind. Plasma rounds ripped through the air, hitting nothing. The dropship didn't retaliate with weapons. It didn't need to. From its underside, something dropped. Not bombs. Soldiers. The figures hit the ground hard, encased in zero-G armor that hissed with adaptive shielding. They moved with precision that no alien military had ever replicated. Quiet. Methodical. Their visors glowed blue. The lead soldier stepped forward, scanned the terrain, and tilted his head toward Vance's position. Eyes on target. Came a voice through his calm human. Sharp. Asset verified. Preparing extraction. Vance stood slowly, weapon lowered. For the first time in years, his breath caught. Not from fear, but from the surreal confirmation that he was no longer alone. The soldier reached him in seconds. No names. No greetings. Just a data pad handed over. Soul Command records confirm. Elias Vance. MIA 9.7 years. Extraction approved under Protocol Iron Veil. What took you so long? Vance asked, his voice like gravel. The soldier didn't answer directly. Instead, he turned and signaled the others to secure the perimeter. We weren't asleep, he said. Just quiet. They thought silence meant extinction. We let them believe it. Vance nodded. The chip hadn't just been a beacon. It was a trigger, one of many. When it activated, it didn't just summon help. It launched a cascade of retaliatory protocols that had been dormant for a decade. Humanity hadn't been destroyed. It had hidden, observed, advanced. The rest of the galaxy had grown arrogant, blind to a civilization that had learned how to win wars without ever firing the first shot. A thunderous blast rocked the canyon wall. The Oceantier had responded. Far overhead, a fleet was emerging, scattered ships blinking in from slip space, erratic and uncoordinated. The Labyrinth security forces, desperate to contain the breach. Vance watched the sky burn. The Scalpel-class ship powered its engines and began ascent protocols. The extraction team moved with clinical precision. One by one, they vanished into the ship's cargo bay until only Vance remained on the edge of the ridge. He looked back once at the world behind him, the arena, the prison, the lie. Then he stepped into the ship. The interior was sleek and silent, lit with pale blue lines that pulsed beneath the floor panels. The air was cold, clean. He inhaled deeply. The soldier beside him removed his helmet, revealing a face as human as his own, older, wearier, but resolute. "Welcome back," the man said. Vance didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "What now?" he asked. The soldier tapped the console and brought up a galactic map. Systems blinked red. Dozens of them. We dismantled the auctioneers. Every last one. He paused. They sold a Terran like a beast. The galaxy needs reminding. As the ship angled away from the dying planet, Vance sat in silence. He had been a symbol of extinction. Now, he would be a herald of return, and the stars would burn with the memory of their mistake. The vessel cut through slip space in eerie silence, carving a path through dimensions like a whisper through fog. On board, Elias Vance stood before the war map, an intricate mesh of stars, trade routes, and glowing red markers that pulsed with encoded fury. Each marker was a wound, an auction site, a prison, a monument to the cruelty of civilizations that once viewed humanity as extinct, or worse, exploitable. 17 confirmed targets, said Commander Ryland Cade, his voice crisp but wearied from years of hidden war. Another 40 flagged. Some are cloaked under mining operations, others under xenobiological labs. but they all tie back to the same networks. The display shifted, zooming into a sector near the Brellian Drift where a cold rogue planet orbited nothing. Gore's spire, Cade added, pointing to a spiraling station embedded in frozen rock. First hit. They're scheduled to auction a Neuralink UR-class hybrid in 3 days. Your data confirms the Oceantier are supplying it. Vance's jaw tightened. Then that's where we begin. He had shed the rags of captivity. Now he wore armor forged in humanity's long absence. Sleek, silent, interfaced with his own new Rogrid. It wasn't just protection. It was memory. Every surface etched with embedded protocols. Every joint a ghost of missions past. He was not merely a soldier. He was a warning given form. The ship's corridors were quiet as he prepared. No rallying speeches. No anthems. Humanity didn't seek to inspire. It sought to correct. Vance inspected his weapon, an evolved iteration of the jury-rigged plasma rifle he had once rebuilt in the labyrinth. Its design was elegant now, yet he kept the same grip worn smooth by his hand. A reminder of where he had begun. Gore's spire appeared like a wound carved into the ice. Built into a colossal asteroid and wrapped in sensor scramblers, it rotated slowly, unaware that death approached. The Terran drop team infiltrated its perimeter, using cloaked gliders, bypassing defense grids with precision. No alarms. No resistance. Not yet. The moment the outer seals were breached, Vance led the insertion team through auxiliary maintenance shafts. They moved without sound, a line of specters through metal corridors. No killing unless necessary. No risk of alerting the Oceantier before the stage was set. Vance reached the auction hall just as the bidding began. Alien delegates stood around a dome platform, where a life form quivered in stasis. It had human DNA, barely. Twisted, elongated. Neural filaments jutted from its spine, linking it to a translator drone. The bidders turned as the door hissed open. No words. No threats. Vance stepped in, his presence a blade through silk. One of the auctioneers, a six-limbed Amari noble, hissed and reached for a control panel. Vance fired once. Through the panel, not the creature. Sparks rained down. "You sold me," he said, voice even. "Do you remember?" Gasps rippled through the chamber. "You bartered away a species for data and spectacle, and now you stand here trading corrupted echoes of us." He raised his rifle. "We've returned, and the debt is due." It was over in seconds. Vance spared no one involved in the transaction. The clone on the platform, too altered to save, was given a painless release. Then they rigged the spire with charges, extracted what little intel they needed, and left it to burn. That strike was the beginning. Others followed. Each mission was swift, precise. Shadow operations across sectors long thought unreachable. Vaults were emptied. Data caches cracked. Former captives freed, many too broken to speak, others fueled by rage. The Empire scrambled. The Oceantier tried to vanish, but their secrets had already been mapped. Their strongholds, revealed by the very data they once harvested from Vance. He became more than a soldier, more than a myth. In time, even his enemies whispered his name with dread. The Reclaimer. He led the charge into the phone ring, a site orbiting a pulsar where biomechanical constructs were forged from stolen genetics. There, he found vats containing cloned Terrans, modified for endurance, intelligence stripped. He destroyed them all, mercifully, efficiently. When Cade approached him afterward, the commander's voice was quiet. "You didn't hesitate." "They weren't people," Vance replied. "They were made to mimic suffering, not understand it." That night, on the bridge of the Crescent Veil, Cade stared at the galactic map. They're starting to unify. The Empire, its contractors, the auction syndicates. We've hit too fast, too deep. They're reacting, Vance said, arms crossed. Not planning. That's fear, not strength. But eventually there will be retaliation. Vance turned to face him. Good. Let them bring a war. We've been preparing for 10 years. Let them test the quiet they've mistaken for surrender. News began to spread. In markets, in bars, in command rooms lit by emergency lights. Stories of human ships that move without trace, of bases vanishing, of overseers found dead with Terran blades in their hearts. Some species withdrew from the auctions entirely. Others turned informant, fearing they'd be next. The Oceantier? Their leadership was fracturing, their mask of superiority shattered. Then came the final phase. The vault, the place where Elias Vance had first been sold. A citadel carved into a hollow moon, guarded by mercenaries, drones, and ancient AI. Humanity didn't sneak this time. It arrived in full view. The fleet decloaked in orbit and broadcast one message in every major language. This is a strike of memory and consequence. You had your silence. Now you will have our voice. The vault's defenders prepared for war. They were not ready. The battle was short. The human ship struck with surgical efficiency, disabling rather than annihilating. When the vault's core finally ruptured, Van stood aboard the command deck and watched the explosion shimmer like a fading dream. Behind him, Kate spoke quietly. "They'll call us monsters for this." "No," Van said. "They'll call us real. And then they'll remember what we were." He didn't stay to watch the debris drift. There were still sites left, still debts to settle. He left the viewing deck and walked the length of the corridor, rifle at his side, armor humming with purpose. The war was not done, but humanity was no longer forgotten. It was feared, and it was hunting.